Welcome to part 9 of my series where I talk about a specific family line of mine and let you know, what I don't know about them, and how I got to the conclusions that I did. And the reason I'm doing this series is because I think it's really important to highlight to you folks how each specific family research project takes a different set of tactics and skills to achieve. So over the last 8 episodes that I did in this series, I talked about all the branches alongside my father's line, and I've exhausted those now, and it's time to talk about my mother's side of the family. And it should be noted that this is much bigger group of families because A, there are simply more records available for the towns that they're located in, and the other thing too is that both my grandmother and my great aunt have taken DNA tests, which enables me to open up the amount of branches that I'm able to trace using DNA. I'm Yona Paley, and I believe genealogy is fun. We're kicking off my mother's side of the family by talking about my Aronovsky family from Vilijampole, Lithuania. I'm going to skip talking about my mother and my grandfather, who are both still living, and talk about when I first began doing genealogy. I was asking my family members what they knew about my Aronovsky family, and what they said was that, well, my great-grandfather was named Irving Aronovsky, and he married a woman named Esther Liebsman. And Irving was born and lived in New York City, and they weren't really sure much more about his family except that Irving's parents were from Russia. It didn't take very long to find Irving on the 1940 US federal census, and from tracing this backwards as well as asking more pointed questions to my family, I soon found out that Irving's parents were named Abraham and Anna Aronovsky. And I was able to find Abe on the 1930, 1920, going all the way back to the 1905 New York State Census, and pretty soon I was able to find the marriage to Anna from 1903. So I found a copy of their marriage certificate, and lo and behold, this gave me another bit of information. It was that Anna, her last name was Danse, so Abe's wife, and Abraham's parents were named Hyman Aronovsky and Rachel Polkowitz. So now I had the name of Abraham's parents, I had the name of his wife. I used this information to keep tracing the family back, and pretty soon I found what has turned out to be one of the most important documents when tracing my Aronovsky family is the 1900 US federal census. And what it shows is it shows Hyman and Rachel living with a bunch of their children, including Abraham, and all of them were born in Russia, with the exception of the youngest daughter. So immediately I already knew that, wow, the entire family came over from the Russian Empire to the United States. And here they were all on this one census, and what it revealed is that they came over probably in the 1880s, which was much earlier than I'd ever encountered with any branches of my family. Most of my family on my father's side came over in like 1905 to 1910 kind of range. So to have someone who came over in the 1880s or 1890s was pretty cool to me, but it proved to have a number of challenges that I didn't have with the other branches. Abe's siblings who were living with him in 1900 were named Louis, Max, Goldie, and Minnie, and I actually managed to trace the trajectory of all 4 of these siblings. Louis, the oldest one, he was an umbrella salesman, and he ended up moving to Pennsylvania. Max, unfortunately, ended up going into a mental institution and dying quite young. And then Minnie married twice. She ended up moving to Massachusetts, and then I actually got in contact with her family later on. And then Goldie, she was kind of the hardest one to trace, but eventually I realized that she had gotten married but kind of lied about her age on most of the documents, which had revealed to me why it was so difficult to trace her. So now I had these siblings, I had these parents, and I started tracing Hyman because this was my third great grandfather and he had come to America probably with his family, and I wanted to find out where he came from. Now, I managed to find his death certificate from 1914, and what it revealed to me is that his parents were named Bernard Aronovsky and Mary. Now, I was pretty sure that these were Anglicizations of Hebrew names or Yiddish names, and I really wasn't sure where to look because I couldn't find a gravestone to reveal the original name, and all I had was this death certificate. But I had the names of all of these siblings, and this was around the time when I was first starting to learn how to use the website JewishGen. I had used it a few times and I hadn't really found anything. I wasn't really sure how to use it properly, but eventually I found some records from my Kushner line, and it gave me the motivation and the confidence to start searching for other branches of my family. And what I did was I looked through all the records I could find for Aronovskys, and I realized that this was a really common last name. There were Aronovskys who showed up, all over Eastern Europe in all sorts of different countries, but there were a lot of them congregated into this one town, Vilijampole in Lithuania. And I started searching by names that I thought maybe some of the siblings, including my great-great-grandfather, would have gone under. So he was Abraham, and then I thought that, okay, Goldie, probably her name was Golda. And by taking these names and doing some digging, I ended up finding a series of like 7 birth records for this one couple that was Chaim Yosef Aronovsky and Rachel Zelda. And I had known that Rachel was named Rachel Zelda because one of her American documents lists her middle name as Zelda. So this already excited me. I thought, wow, maybe I found these birth documents. And so I looked through them, and indeed, there was the birth record of my great-great-grandfather Abraham from 1877. A bunch of siblings, probably 3 or 4 of them who died in the old country, never came over. I have no idea what happened to them. And then I managed to find a census from 1874 with Chaim Yosef and Rachel shortly after they had gotten married, living with their oldest firstborn son, Lazer, who would be Louis, who was the oldest on the 1900 census. And they were living with Chaim Yosef's parents, who were Baruch Aronovsky and Chana Mirka. So now I knew that my 4th great-grandparents were Baruch and Chana Mirka, and Baruch's father on the census was listed as Yussel Aronovsky. Now this was where it started getting really tough, because Yussel Aronovsky is actually where I'm officially brick-walled on this family. So I haven't been able to get anywhere past my 5th great-grandfather, Yussel Aronovsky, but I've been using a number of tricks to sort of figure out which family branch he may have been a part of. And I actually talked about this on the previous episode I did, talking about census numbers and house numbers and things like that, where there was only this one census for Baruch Aronovsky, but I realized that the number that he was registered under the census, there were also other Aronovskys who had previously been listed under that census number, and they all seem to be descended from this one guy, Abraham Aronovsky, born probably sometime in like the 1760s or earlier, because he had children who were born, in the 1780s, 1790s, and all that it mentioned about Abraham was that he was their father. But they were registered under the same census registration number, and descendants of Abraham also showed up on the same page in tax records in Vilijampole as Baruch did. And to add to that, I had a DNA match from my great aunt, and it is actually the biggest match, my biggest unknown Aronovsky match that I found. And this person is also descended from one of these siblings who was the son of Abraham Aronovsky. And it's not a small match. The largest segment size is like 40 out of, I think, 80 or 81. And there's only 3 segments, which means that there has to be a second one of these segments that's at least 20 centimorgans big. So this is exactly what we're trying to look for in terms of DNA. We're trying to look for at least 2 segments of at least 20 centimorgans or larger due to endogamy. So it's all very, very compelling, and just because there's so many Aronovskys in this town, I've decided not to really add any further generations onto my tree yet. I'm still holding out to see maybe if there's some more records that are going to come out to prove or disprove my theory, but all the evidence seems to be pointing toward Yussel being either the son or grandson of this Abraham Aronovsky. And in that case, that would just blow my tree up. I mean, I would add multiple generations and multiple branches to there, but you always want to be super careful, especially when adding so many people at once. If you make a little mistake, it takes a long time to correct, and a lot of the damage has already been done. So for now, I'm holding off on this, but it does seem very, very compelling given, 3 or 4 bits of circumstantial evidence from the city of Vilijampole. So let me know what you think about this. Does it seem compelling to you? Does it seem like something you would wait a little bit longer to get more evidence on? Or would you be like, okay, this is definitely the case? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you think. So anyways, that wraps up our episode on my Aronovsky line. Probably one of my biggest lines, just because of the fact that there were so many Aronovskys in this city of Vilijampole, and it's also 5 generations back. They also came to the United States in the 1880s, so much earlier than a lot of my branches. And yeah, I'm hoping to take it back even further at some point in the future. If you liked it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, I'm looking forward to bringing you more videos as well as tips and tricks that you can use in your own genealogy research. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll get you next time.